Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley. And with me today, I'm so honored to have Bukky Ayoade. Welcome to the show. I'm so honored to have you on. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so today we're going to be talking about menopause, perimenopause, women's health in respect to that. And Bukky, you have founded the Vibrant Midlife. And so I want you to tell us all about that. How did you come about that? Like, what was the inspiration and what sort of led you down this path?
Okay. So I'm a pharmacist by background. I've been a pharmacist for over 3 decades. And I've worked majorly in the pharmaceutical industry. So this was 2019. I've done a lot of consulting work, etc. 2019 was my last contract. And it was a contract that, it took so much out of me. And I just stopped and I thought, you know what? I need to be doing something that's on purpose that I believe God has designed me for. So I just took time out. I just thought, you know what, I need to stop doing this. And I think it was significant because it was the year I was 55 as well. So I stopped. Cut a long story short, I did career coaching, did a whole lot of stuff. And I'm a pharmacist, but I'm the pharmacist that doesn't like to take medicine. So I'm always looking for the natural solution. I knew that when I crystallized what I was going to be doing, I knew that I was going to work in healthcare still. I knew that I was going to work with women. I knew that I was going to work with women roughly my age or thereabouts. And that was it. And so I did all of that piece of work and I just parked it. I went away. This was October, November, back end of that year. Went away and came back in January. I had the rest. I was refreshed and I thought, okay, let me get back into consulting work. But then the pandemic hit. And the pandemic hit, there were no contracts. There was no pharma work. I was at home doing nothing. So I'm like, what do I do? And it just got laid on me. Okay, all of that background work that you had done, go and pull it out and start to create what what you said you were going to do. And so that's what I did. And I worked with a consultant to help me brand and come through. And a Vibrant Midlife came about because I knew I was going to work with midlife women. So midlife had to show up somewhere in the whole thing. But when you Google midlife, the first thing you see is midlife crisis. And I was like, no, we're not going down that route. And I just wanted to bring a different perspective to midlife. So we came through with various words, etc., etc. And we came up with Vibrant Midlife, which apparently a lot of people like, and I love it too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that background with us. And so, i- deciding to launch this, you said that it was something that you felt passionate about, right? And passionate about working with women in the age group that you were in and, before and after, because we're going to be talking about perimenopause, which
Mhm,
can affect women who are much younger than their
mhm,
50s, right?
mhm, mhm.
So why don't we start with that? Let's talk a little bit about the differences between perimenopause and menopause, and then how that kind of begins and transitions for women.
Okay, so menopause itself is one time point.
Mm.
It's one time point when a woman has not had a period for 12 consecutive months. At that point, at that time point, after 12 consecutive months, so it has to be the stress is on the consecutive. You count 1 to 12, and you've missed a period for 12 consecutive months. At that time point, we would say a woman has hit her menopause. What's important is that all of that period before before that time point, which is the perimenopause, because that's when a woman will start to experience symptoms. And that's the period leading up to the menopause. It's the period where I speak to women. I say, be aware of this time as you're coming from your late 30s to early 40s and start to recognize changes. Because once we recognize changes, we know what's happening. We can then obviously bring through solutions that will help manage symptoms we bring through solutions. Oh, you spoke to lifestyle that set us up for a healthier life as we age. So yeah, the perimenopause is what we seriously need to be aware of. When our symptoms start to come through, typically what are the symptoms? It could be changing our periods, frequency. It could be, lighter periods, heavier periods. The classic one that everybody thinks or knows of is the hot flushes. It could be gut issues. It could be joint pain. And when we progress, we can talk about these different things. So yeah, that's the difference.
Okay, great. Thank you for kind of detailing that for us. And I think that some things you pointed out in there are really interesting because you mentioned gut issues. And I don't know that we typically think that that's an indicator for perimenopause. I think that that's something that people often attribute to other issues, right? And not realizing that this could be a part of that, larger picture. So that's really good to know. And then joint pain as well, another thing that could be attributed to many other things. And then realizing that that could also be an indicator that you're kind of going through this perimenopause. And so, yes, excellent information, I think. Thank you for sharing that. And you touched a little bit on the lifestyle. And so let's dig into that a little bit more, like what we can do as we're going through this perimenopause period and then into menopause and beyond to really set us up for a healthy lifestyle and life as we're aging.
Okay, so I think even before I speak about that, is to first recognize that every woman's experience of the menopause and perimenopause is unique. So whatever you're looking to do, we should always be thinking to have an individualized approach. M- Typically, with a woman that just without any complications or, early, coming through early or whatever, typically menopause is diagnosed by symptoms. Well, at least within the guidance that we have here in the UK, is menopause is diagnosed by symptoms. So one of the things I say is be aware of symptoms. So know your symptoms, but also be aware of your underlying health. So just your vital numbers, your blood pressure, the cholesterol, the blood sugars, all of those kind of things. Have your baselines, be conscious of those. I also, when I speak with women and within our framework, my starting point typically is mindset. I say, have a mindset of well-being, because that positivity, that can do, we will overcome this, we will work through this, is also very, very helpful to help women navigate this transition. The other thing is get the right support. Don't do midlife alone. So those are some of the things. When we talk about lifestyle the aspects that can help us, is the classic well-being pillars. So it will be your nutrition, it will be your physical activity, it will be how you manage stress, it will be, you know, the quality of your sleep hygiene, it will your relationships, it will be your relationship with alcohol, smoking, those kind of things. Those are, the main lifestyle pillars that we will look at. And then as we progress, if you want me to dig deeper into various things, I can do that. That's not a problem.
Well, no, those are some great points that you brought up just right from the start. Remembering that this is an individual experience. So, although, collectively as women, we all go through this, we are all individual. We are all going to have different, unique experiences, and making sure that we are working with our doctor. And this, I think, can take us on a whole nother path in speaking to professionals about how to manage this, but to remember that we are all going to have a unique experience and make sure that we're, like you said, our numbers are good, our cholesterol, our heart health, blood sugars, all of that, of course, is absolutely imperative in knowing those as you move forward. And so those are some great points, I think, to keep in mind. And I love that you pointed out also about mindset and having that mindset of positivity, that this is a challenging time. It's a transition, a change that we're going through, and working from a positive mindset can make a difference. I love that you shared that too.
The other thing I wanted to just point out as you were speaking that came through to me was the fact that because of the depletion in our hormones, some of those cardiovascular and metabolic aspects that you mentioned, that happens as a matter of course, even without menopause, even without the perimenopause and symptoms that we experience. Just because we are losing estrogen, it impacts on our cardiac health, it impacts on our metabolic health. You've got like a double whammy. So it's a period of time when a woman does really need to pay attention to herself, need to listen to her body and understand that these changes, when things start to happen, not we're quick to go to the doctor, but what is important is if you're aware of your symptoms, you're tracking your symptoms, it helps you have an informed conversation with the healthcare professional when you get there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Another great point there in keeping aware of what is happening in your body and monitoring that. So, like you said, you can have a really well informed discussion and not just, random. So, that's an excellent point. Let's talk a little bit then about some more of the physical and emotional changes that are starting to happen as we transition through this period.
Okay, so I talk about symptoms. I classify them into three groups. So we have the physical symptoms, which are, I've said, the hot flushes, the night sweats, we start to lay weight down along the middle. That's nature's way of trying to protect women. And then you're thinking, no, I don't want this. So you change in body shape. I talked about sometimes you get some migraine type headache, muscle pain, joint pain, skin changes. Those are some of the physical symptoms. So if we look at the emotional cycle, well, I call them psychological symptoms. Obviously, that's the mood changes, the irritability. It could be exacerbated anxiety or onset of anxiety. So a woman that's not experienced anxiety before, suddenly lack of focus, lack of concentration. So that one they call the brain fog. And then another group of important symptoms that are possibly less spoken about, they're called GSM. So sometimes I struggle to pronounce the word genitourinary symptoms. So just the vaginal symptoms. So we're talking vaginal dryness, itching, painful intercourse. And, to the extent that it's important for women to be aware of all of these things because our symptoms can impact our lives significantly, impact our working lives, impact our personal lives, impact our intimate relationships. And so we need to be aware, we need to be having those open, honest conversations with our nearest and dearest to help them understand what we're going through. Because I say to women all the time, you can't have a headache every night. You can't have a headache every night. I've talked about the top line, the more common symptoms. There are some so less common. So things like sensitivity to noise, for example, things like changes in body odor. A woman going through this transition may have, it's not even an uncommon symptom, may have a reduced libido, those kind of aspects. It's just being aware of all of those kind of things.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing those with us. And I think that we often hear about the brain fog and lack of concentration and lack of focus, irritability. I think those are pretty common for a lot of women during this time. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we hear a lot about those. But
Mm-hmm.
then, you mentioned some things that we don't often hear about and could be very disconcerting. And that's change in body odor or change in, skin condition and, all of that. It's so good to have this information, I think, because then you feel like I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's had this experience. There's not something wrong with me.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just recognizing that at this phase of life, I have hormones that impact most of our body symptoms. They are dropping. And this is the effect that manifests when that happens. just knowing those things is very helpful.
For sure. Let's talk then a little bit about how we can alleviate maybe some of these symptoms that we're experiencing.
Mhm. So the approach that's laid down in guidance is, I mentioned top front, to have an individualized approach. Our guidance talks about, we have a nice guidance that supports menopause, talks about lifestyle change, and then talks about medication, which mainly is HRT. But there are some other prescribed meds that are and then another thing that could be helpful is something called cognitive behavior therapy. It's a kind of talking therapy that helps you bring in through some form of reframing. But my focus, as I said to you up front, is I have a lifestyle medicine approach to menopause care. So I'll probably default to speak around lifestyle. And so I cover maybe two or three of the top pillars. If we talk about the first one, food. So I'll start there. Food, and I say this all the time. Food is medicine. Our food is medicine. And if I could give our listeners one top tip around food, I would say eat more plants. Yeah. And why food is important? It's important for our gut health. It's important for our immunity. It's important for our weight management. And the foods we eat, if we eat the foods that help us balance blood sugars, for example, helps us manage our symptoms. There are some foods, for example, that exacerbate symptoms. So you would hear people say that spicy foods exacerbate flushes, for example. And being aware of all of these various things helps you know what to choose. We talked about heart health. We talked about metabolic health. We've taken away sugars to help with that. Eating more plants, things that are good, that are nourishing. We eat foods that help us feel fuller for longer. Adding more proteins because we're losing muscle mass. There's a whole lot.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I love that you said, food is medicine. And this is not a new concept. This goes back ages and ages ago. Really, the types of foods that we eat that really have an impact in our overall health and well-being for sure. I love that you shared all of that with us and how important that is, not just for, gut health, but, just overall well-being. So thank you for detailing all of that. That's excellent. And I think that it's important to remember that this is kind of a whole picture scenario, right? We've got to look at, like you mentioned, the cognitive therapies, talk therapies, working
Mhm.
with someone for your mind, that aspect of it, as well as the physical in terms of working out
Mhm.
and, just eating right. So I think that it's important to remember it is the whole picture. You can't just change one thing and expect it all to be better.
And also, just to say as well, and when you talked about working out, a lot of the time we feel that we need to do anything aggressive. I always say to women, I say, what we need is moderate and consistent
Mm.
in terms of physical activity. Do what you enjoy because that way you're able to sustain it and be consistent with it. To your point, it is a whole picture. So you can't say, oh, I've done food and I won't do exercise, or I've done exercise or I won't do food, or I've done food and I won't manage stress. It's the whole, they're all the different spokes, I call them, of menopause care. And that whole bringing things through together, as well as your mindset, what are you doing to nourish your soul, your spirit, all of those things, and that's why I talk about having a holistic approach to menopause care is so key.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for reiterating that. That's absolutely valid. Let's talk now a little bit about how we can initiate some of these conversations. Because as you mentioned, we need to be talking with our significant others, people in our lives. And how do we begin those conversations?
I'm hoping that you're with a significant other, that you have good channels of communication anyway. and just be open and honest. Maybe find them some material that they can read themselves. So that could be helpful. They've had a read, then you can have a conversation. But really, really, it's just to make them aware of the fact that at this phase of life, these are the various things that happen, that that can impact a woman's life. Be vulnerable, ask for support in that way. That's with a significant other. If we're looking at the healthcare professional, I spoke about menopause being diagnosed by symptoms. Use a symptom tracker, use the QR code on here and say, we have a free symptom tracker, or just find a menopause symptom tracker so that you begin to document what's going on in your body. I spoke about women understanding the symptoms of menopause so that when they start to appear, they are aware what might be going on. Because what I hear a lot from women is that I didn't even know what hit me, and so that's why I say awareness is key. So yeah, having those conversations and reading up yourself from reliable sources, because we in menopause space, we call it the menopause Wild West. There's all sorts out there on the internet. There's all sorts of information out there. But there are reputable, reliable sources of information that give you an evidence-based approach, and so it's reading up yourself, arm yourself with that information so that when you go for your clinician's appointment, when you're having that conversation about, okay, how you're going to manage this, if say, for example, you're needing to go down the medical route, it's that you're making an informed choice about your care.
Yeah, great point. I love that you brought up about maybe getting reliable information that you can share with those who are closest to you that can be used to help initiate a conversation. Because when they understand a little bit more about what you're going through, I think then there's some more compassion, right? A little bit more empathy or
Mhm.
sympathy they can kind of see like, oh, they've not just gone off the deep end. And, there's a reason why all of this is
Or she's
happening.
just suddenly changed into the wicked witch of.
Right, exactly. We touched a little bit on HRT and that's hormone replacement therapy.
Mhm.
If you don't mind, dig into that a little bit. And I know that you're not necessarily, a doctor or, clinician in that way, but do you want to share anything about that in terms of what women can expect when they start to look at things like that?
I will touch on it briefly. I tend not to talk on these type of fora in depth around HRT because it does require a specialized approach. But what I do say is HRT is licensed for management of menopause symptoms. But again, it comes hand in hand with other things. The thing to be aware of is when you're considering HRT, read up yourself about the benefits and the risks. Your clinician will have that conversation with you about the benefits and the risks, depending on your medical history, your present lifestyle. There are various considerations that a clinician would take into account to determine what sort of HRT they recommend for you. Again, there are different forms of preparations depending on your lifestyle. It could be the patches, it could be the gel. There are, the main hormones that are being replaced that women take in HRT are estrogen and progesterone. Depending on the woman's status, if she's got a womb, she would need an estrogen and progesterone. If she doesn't have a womb, she would need possibly be on estrogen only. There are ways, different formulations and different regimes, some are sequential. So it's important to read up yourself and then have that conversation, what's the best regime for yourself. Some people these days, mostly here in the UK, a lot of what is prescribed are transdermal, so patches, gels. But yeah, HRT is a big, big topic. It requires a specialized conversation and yeah, tailored to that woman. What I would say though is that HRT of itself is not the be all and end all. It requires that combination approach, still thinking lifestyle, etc. And it also requires some tinkering. So women will go on HRT and still feel they need to tinker a little bit till they get something that's stable for them.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that information. And again, I think you pointed out a number of times that it's imperative that you're speaking with your doctor so that you can design a plan that makes sense for you. As you said, your lifestyle, your general health, and all of that. So, absolutely, paramount that you're discussing this with your doctor before making any decisions.
I would also say for women that have, if you've got a family history of cancer or women that have a cancer diagnosis, it's just being aware of your medical history, reading up from reliable sources, and then having the conversation with the clinician. I mean, because it can be a tricky area, and it's important that women they've taken that information on board themselves before they go through to the clinician.
Yeah, excellent. Well, so then let's talk a little bit more on the lifestyle aspect. And, is there something that you really think that first and foremost that the listeners should know in terms of, lifestyle management? What would you share if somebody's coming into this period of their life that you feel like it's absolutely vital that they know?
I would say I mentioned the lifestyle pillars. So the food, your physical activity, managing stress, sleep, substance use. This this period of time offers us an opportunity to rethink and do things differently. It offers an opportunity to make those tweaks. But lifestyle change can be hard. So what you want to do is go easy on yourself, tackle one thing, pick up one thing, get that, tick that off, and then think about the next so that, a woman doesn't get herself into overwhelm. The other thing I would say is choose things that you like. So people will talk about, oh, this diet, this is good for menopause. This, you can have this, you can have that, you can have, but if they're not suited to your palate, for example, you're not going to sustain it. So you have to choose food groups, for example, that you like. Same as exercise. Choose things that you like. I mean, people say, oh, I go running. I hate running. I don't even like the sensation of running. So you would never catch me run, but I love to walk, and that's what I do. And so I'm able to sustain that aspect of physical activity. We talk about you needing to do stretching exercises and using things like resistance bands, etc., to build up your muscles because we lose muscle. I can do them, but things like squats and things that I have to lie down, I just do not like. So, it's just finding things that work for you and just doing those things small, consistent, so that we sustain and help us maintain a healthy aging.
I love it. And you made such great points there. The fact that you've got to kind of get a handle on one aspect before trying to tackle all of it, because it is so easy for us to want to change everything about everything. And then we just can't continue because it's too much change at once, right? And so choosing to make small changes in one area until you've kind of got a handle on it, and then add in those other changes. Excellent point. And then again about sharing, you've got to find the types of things that you enjoy doing. Hiking, if it's not running for you, it's walking or it's bicycling or it's whatever brings you joy that you can carry on throughout your life is really what's important.
I would also say a couple of other things just relating to lifestyle. This modern day that we live in is busy. We take on everything. We need to practice self care. We need to manage stress. We need to use boundaries to not
Mm.
overload ourselves. And then one of the other things that really, really helps lifestyle change stick is accountability and support. Though I always say that's the actual glue that makes things stick. Because left to our own devices, we can be not moving, to your point. Get into a groove with the husband, for example, go walking together, set up a time to do that. Or, and look at the meal plan together. It's just doing things together is helpful as well.
Yes,
For the
absolutely.
single people on the call, because I'm one of those, find a buddy.
Yes, and that's what I was just going to say. I love that you shared about someone that can help hold you accountable. And so it's finding a friend or whoever that wants to go walking with you, that the two of you can organize times consistently that you can do that. And I'm fortunate enough to be involved in a national running group, but often we're hiking or walking or paddle boarding
Mhm.
or doing some other type of activity as a group. But because of that, you've got somebody that you plan to meet
Yeah.
regularly. And so they hold you accountable. And so that's fantastic. So research in your area if there's a group like that, or start a group of your own that you can work together and hold each other accountable for these lifestyle changes. Yeah. Awesome. Well, can we talk a little bit about some myths and misconceptions that are around perimenopause, menopause?
So I think I may have alluded to one already. The main one for me, HRT is a panacea. No, it's not the be all and end all of menopause care or menopause or managing symptoms. It is one aspect of symptoms. And some people choose not to use HRT, but they can still, with a lot of the approaches that we've spoken about, they can still learn to manage and cope with their symptoms and actually resolve symptoms. So that's one. The other one that I would say that is like a woman in midlife, because midlife typically is described as over 40, is past it. I'm like, no, a woman in midlife. I mean, honestly, I can say that right now I am living my best life. I always say I am 10 years fitter. I am healthier, fitter now than I was 10 years ago. Definitely. Because, and I guess possibly because of my approach, but I've just learned various things and tactics to help me. And I engage in activity that helps me live healthier, helps me live fitter at this phase of life. I mean, I told you about how I started this and, at what, over 50, and I found my groove. So I say midlife is amazing. You spoke about kids gone to college is when you start to make all those different changes and you've got time. If you've had a long career, you can pivot. There's so much you can do. So yeah, I honestly believe that it's an amazing phase of life.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think that in the past, perhaps it was much harder for many women. It was much harder in the past. We physically, the demands were a lot harder. That's not to say that there isn't the case still in some, areas today. But I think that for the most part in, Western culture, things have gotten a lot easier. So 50 is not the same now as it was 2 and 3 decades ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that that myth of your life is over when you hit 50 is
Mhm.
totally debunked at this point, right?
Yeah, we've lost that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It really has become, the fresh start for a lot of people. And like you said, you often have the opportunity to pivot and try something completely different at this point in your life. And so I think that it's wonderful to remember that it is the start of a new phase. And this transition, the perimenopause, menopause, this is that transition period that is the start of a new phase of your life. And remembering it from that kind of positive aspect, I think is important too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Well, I have so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much. I think that this information is so important for women to internalize, right? And remember that these changes are normal and natural, but keep in mind that there's ways that we can, you know, change things that make it easier as we go through this transition, incorporating the things that you've suggested with eating, the lifestyle changes for exercising, all of that, I think is fantastic that we really need to remember that we have a hand in making this a smoother, easier transition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, before we close out our conversation, I always like to ask my guests if there's any books that they have found beneficial or influential that they'd like to share with the listeners. And so, do you have any you'd like to share with us now?
Yes, I have a couple. I got the first one is called the Daniel Plan, and it talks about 40 days to a healthier life. So all of these lifestyle changes that we talked about, it's a really comprehensive book. It's by American authors as well, so I'm sure your audience would love that. So it's the Daniel Plan, 40 Days to a Healthier Life. Then we have this other one. I spoke about having I Love to Walk, and this is called 52 Ways to Walk. It's by Annabelle Street. The surprising science of walking for wellness and joy, 1 week at a time.
I love it. Thank you for sharing those, and I'll include those in the show notes, and then the listeners can check those out. Is there any podcasts that you enjoyed listening to that you'd like to share?
I'm not so much so a podcast person, I'm afraid, if that's okay.
Certainly, that is totally fine, and I can appreciate that as well. Sometimes it is nice just to have some music playing, not having to be thinking as you're walking.
Honestly, that's the thing. So when I'm out walking, most of the time, even the music is my switch off time. So I just think, you know what, I just need quiet and walk. And sometimes I'm meditating or I'm praying or etc. So yeah.
Oh, for sure. I love that. Okay, so one last thing is I would love for you to share where the listeners can follow along on everything that you're doing. I know you have a Facebook group, so if you'd like to share that. And lastly, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the book that you've written. And so before we close out, let's have you talk about that and share with the listeners what that's about.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So it's called the Vibrant Midlife Wellness and Affirmation Journal. I like writing. I like journaling. Journaling is a form of self-care. And what it does is it's an accountability tool as well. So I've created this journal where we cover the lifestyle pillars that we've talked about. It's got a wellness action. It's got affirmations in there because we know we have to you speak life into us. It's got a meditation verse. It's got quotations and you can capture gratitudes as well. This journal, it just helps you focus on all of the wellness pillars that I spoke about and gives you an opportunity to just take time out for yourself on a daily basis to write things. It's undated as well, so you can pick up anywhere you like. And it covers various topics, stress, sleep, love, money. I just thought just a simple tool for women to use to practice self-care daily.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, for sure, we'll include that in the notes as well. But go ahead and share with us where people can follow along on your journey and what you're doing.
So our website is vibrantmidlife.com. Our Facebook group, which is the safe space that we've created for women. So, women can come in and have confidence that they can share what they're sharing without any reprisals, is Vibrant Midlife with Bukky on Facebook. And then Instagram at Vibrant Midlife, and LinkedIn, I'm Bukky Ayoade. That operates all of those places.
Perfect. I'll include all of that again in the show notes so that the listeners can easily find that and find you. And the Facebook group sounds amazing. I love that it's a safe place that you can talk about what's happening and not have any judgment. And, so that's excellent. I think that we all need that. Thank you for sharing that. Again, I have so appreciated your time and your knowledge. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk more soon.